Why would a mother tell her own mother that her son achieved nothing in life? How does a man go from being erased by his family to realizing it was never about him at all? And what happens when the truth behind that lie finally comes out? My name is Daniel Kovac, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a technical consultant for a mid-sized firm in the city, analyzing data systems and helping companies optimize their workflows. It's not glamorous, but it's stable, it pays well, and I'm good at it. I live alone in a small apartment on the east side, the kind of place where you can hear your neighbor's television through the walls, but nobody bothers you. I've always been the quiet type, the one who listens more than he speaks. The one people forget is in the room until he says something that matters. For most of my life, that was fine. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I had my work, a few close friends, and my family. Or at least, I thought I did. It started 3 months ago, though I didn't realize it at first. Little things. My mother stopped answering my calls. The first time, I figured she was busy. The second time, I thought maybe her phone was acting up. By the 5th unanswered call, I knew something was wrong. I tried texting instead. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" No response. "Mom, if you're upset about something, we can talk about it." Nothing. "Please just let me know you're all right." Silence. I waited a week, then called my grandmother. Vera had always been the family anchor, the one person everyone respected and turned to when things got complicated. She was 79, still sharp as a knife, and she didn't tolerate nonsense from anyone. "Baba," I said when she picked up, "have you talked to Mom lately?" There was a pause, a long one. "Yes," she said finally. Her voice was different, guarded. "Is she okay? She won't return my calls." Another pause. "Daniel, your mother is going through some things right now. Maybe it's best if you give her some space." I frowned, staring at the wall of my apartment. "Space? Baba, I haven't done anything. I don't even know what's going on." I know. She sighed, and I could hear the weariness in her voice. "Just give it time." She hung up before I could ask anything else. That conversation sat with me for days. I replayed it over and over, trying to understand what I'd missed. My relationship with my mother had never been perfect, but it had been fine. Normal. We talked every couple of weeks, met for lunch once a month. I helped her move furniture when she needed it, fixed her computer when it broke, listened when she wanted to complain about work or the neighbors. And then she remarried. Marko entered our lives 2 years ago. He was 61, well-dressed, confident in that effortless way some men have. He owned a small business, something to do with imports and distribution, and he carried himself like someone who'd earned his success. My mother met him at a community event, and within 6 months they were engaged. I didn't have strong feelings about Marko at first. He seemed fine, polite, a little too eager to tell stories about his accomplishments, but that wasn't unusual for someone his age. My mother was happy, and that was what mattered. But after they got married, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Marko would make little comments during family gatherings. "Daniel's job sounds comfortable," he'd say with a slight smile. "Not everyone needs to aim high, right?" Or, "It's good that Daniel is content with where he is. Ambition isn't for everyone." My mother would laugh along and I'd brush it off. Just harmless teasing, I told myself. But the comments kept coming, and they started to stick. Then came the family group chat. It was a WhatsApp group my cousin Petar had created a year ago. Just the immediate family. My mother, grandmother, Aunt Ivana, Petar, and me. We used it to coordinate gatherings, share photos, wish each other happy birthdays, normal family stuff. One evening in late September, my phone buzzed with a notification. Aunt Ivana. "Everyone free on the 15th? Elena's hosting dinner at her place." Petar. "I'm in." Baba. Yes, I'll be there. My mother. Great, Marko will make his famous lamb. I waited for someone to confirm the time, but the conversation moved on. They started talking about what to bring, who needed a ride, whether the weather would be good. I stared at my phone, confused. I typed a message. What time should I come? I watched the screen. 3 dots appeared under my mother's name, then disappeared. No response. The conversation continued around me as if I hadn't said anything. I tried again. Mom, should I bring anything? Nothing. Peter sent a laughing emoji in response to something my grandmother said. My aunt shared a recipe. My mother reacted to a photo, but no one acknowledged my messages. I set my phone down and sat there in my apartment staring at the wall. The silence wasn't just silence, it was deliberate, calculated. I'd been erased from the conversation as cleanly as if I'd never been part of it. The dinner happened without me. I know because Petar posted photos on Facebook. My whole family gathered around my mother's dining table, smiling. Marko at the head of the table, carving the lamb. My grandmother laughing at something my aunt said. Everyone looked happy. I wasn't in a single photo. I didn't confront anyone. Part of me wanted to, but another part, the part that had learned to observe and wait, told me to be patient. Something was happening, and I needed to understand it before I reacted. 2 weeks later, I ran into my mother at a cafe near her house. I was picking up coffee on my way to a client meeting when I saw her through the window. She was sitting at a corner table with 2 women I didn't recognize, laughing over something on her phone. I hesitated, then walked inside. Mom? She looked up, and for a split second I saw something in her face. Surprise, maybe discomfort. Then it was gone, replaced by a polite smile. Oh, Daniel. Hello. Hi. I stood there awkwardly, holding my briefcase. I didn't know you came here. Sometimes. She glanced at her friends, then back at me. We're just having a quick chat. Right, of course. I shifted my weight. Hey, I've been trying to reach you. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Because you haven't been answering my calls, and I wasn't invited to the dinner last month. Daniel. She cut me off, her voice quiet but firm. This isn't the time. One of her friends looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. My mother's face had gone tight, her jaw set in that way it did when she was trying to stay composed in public. Okay, I said slowly. When would be a good time? I'll call you. She didn't call. I started paying more attention after that. I watched the family group chat, even though I never sent another message. I checked Facebook and Instagram, saw the gatherings I wasn't invited to, the photos I wasn't in. My aunt posted a picture from someone's birthday party. My grandmother shared a video of Petar's daughter's dance recital. My mother tagged Marko in a post about a weekend trip they'd taken. I existed in none of it. Then, one night in early November, I overheard something that changed everything. I was at a small restaurant downtown, sitting alone at the bar after a long day of work. The place was quiet, just a few other people scattered around. I was halfway through my meal when I heard a familiar voice from a booth behind me. Petar. I feel bad for him, he was saying. But at the same time, you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves, you know? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. What did Elena say exactly? A woman's voice asked. I didn't recognize her. She told Baba that Daniel's basically given up on life, that he's stuck in a dead-end job, refuses to improve himself, and just wants everyone to feel sorry for him. My chest tightened. That's harsh, the woman said. I know, but look at him. He's 34 and he's still doing the same thing he was doing 10 years ago. No ambition, no drive. Marko's been trying to help him network, get him better opportunities, but Daniel just shuts him down. I set my fork down carefully, my hands shaking. Marko seems like a good guy, the woman said. He is. He's been great for Elena, Finally, someone who actually has their life together, you know? Not like Daniel. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I paid my bill and left, walking out into the cold November air. I walked for blocks, my mind racing, trying to process what I'd just heard. My mother had told my grandmother that I'd achieved nothing, that I was a failure, that I refused to improve myself. None of it was true. I had a degree in computer systems from a good university. I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position to a consulting role that paid more than most people my age made. I owned my car outright, had no debt except my student loans, which I was paying down steadily. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I was fine. But none of that mattered, because my mother had decided I wasn't, and she'd convinced everyone else of it too. I walked back to my apartment, unlocked the door, and sat down at my desk. For a long time, I just stared at the wall, trying to understand how this had happened, how I'd gone from being part of my family to being erased from it. And then I thought about Marko, about his comments, his subtle digs, the way he always seemed to be there when decisions were made, whispering in my mother's ear. I opened my laptop and started a new document. I titled it Timeline, and I began to write down everything I could remember. I didn't always have a bad relationship with my mother. For most of my life, we were fine. Not close in the way some mothers and sons are, but respectful, supportive in our own way. After my father left when I was 12, it was just the two of us for a long time. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and I learned early to take care of myself. I cooked simple meals, did my own laundry, kept my grades up without being asked. When I got my first job at 16, I started paying for my own clothes and school supplies. It wasn't about being noble. It was just what needed to happen. By the time I graduated high school and went to college, we'd settled into a comfortable routine. I'd call her once a week, visit during breaks. She'd ask about my classes. I'd ask about her work. We didn't talk about feelings much, but we were there for each other when it mattered. When I got my first real job after college, I helped her with rent a few times. When her car broke down, I paid for half the repairs. When she wanted to take a vacation but couldn't afford it, I booked her a weekend at a bed and breakfast upstate. These weren't grand gestures. They were just what you did for family. She appreciated it. At least I thought she did. But then she met Marko. I remember the first time she told me about him. It was a phone call, and she sounded different, lighter, excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Daniel, I met someone," she said. "Yeah? That's great, Mom. His name is Marko. He's a businessman, very successful. He owns his own company." "What kind of company?" "Import and distribution. He works with suppliers all over Europe. He's very well connected." I could hear the pride in her voice and something else. Relief, maybe. Like she'd been waiting for someone like him to come along. "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. "He wants to meet you. Maybe we could all have dinner next week." We met at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. Marko was already there when I arrived, sitting next to my mother in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He stood when I approached, extending his hand with a broad smile. "Daniel, your mother has told me so much about you." His handshake was firm, confident. Everything about him screamed success. "It's nice to meet you," I said. We sat down, and the conversation flowed easily at first. Marko talked about his business, the challenges of managing international suppliers, the importance of building strong relationships. He asked me about my work, and I explained what I did in broad terms. "Technical consulting," he said, nodding. "That's a stable field." The way he said stable made it sound like code for something else, something less. "It's good work," I said. Of course. Not everyone needs to chase big dreams, right? Stability is important too." My mother smiled, her hand resting on Marko's arm. She didn't seem to notice the subtle condescension in his tone, or maybe she did and didn't care. The dinner went on like that. Marko dominating the conversation, My mother hanging on his every word, and me sitting there feeling increasingly like a prop in someone else's scene. But I didn't say anything. My mother was happy. That was what mattered. They got engaged 3 months later. The wedding was small, just close family, and a few of Marko's business associates. I stood next to my mother during the ceremony, watched her exchange vows with a man she'd known for less than a year, and told myself this was a good thing. She deserved happiness after everything she'd been through. But after the wedding, things started to change. It was little things at first. My mother started using phrases that didn't sound like her. You need to think bigger, Daniel. You're too comfortable where you are. Marko says people who don't push themselves get left behind. Marko says. Those 2 words became a constant refrain. Marko says this. Marko thinks that. Marko believes you should do this instead. At family gatherings, Marko would steer conversations, always positioning himself as the expert on whatever topic came up. Business, politics, relationships, health. He had an opinion on everything, and my mother echoed those opinions as if they were gospel. Daniel's been at the same job for 8 years now, she said once during a birthday dinner at my grandmother's apartment. That's not a bad thing, my grandmother said. Loyalty is valuable. Is it loyalty or is it fear? Marko asked, leaning back in his chair. Sometimes people stay where they are because they're afraid to take risks. He looked at me when he said it, his expression friendly, but his eyes calculating. I'm not afraid, I said quietly. I'm just doing what works for me. Of course, of course. He waved his hand dismissively. Everyone has their own path. But the seed had been planted. I could see it in my grandmother's face, the slight furrow in her brow as she looked at me. Was I afraid? Was I stuck? Over the next year, Marko continued to plant those seeds. Always subtle, always framed as concern rather than criticism. Has Daniel thought about going back to school? An MBA could really open doors for him. Daniel seems content, but I wonder if he's really challenged in his work. It's important to have goals, not just coast along. My mother absorbed it all. She started treating me differently, her tone shifting from supportive to disappointed, like I was letting her down by not being more like Marko. I tried talking to her about it once. We were having coffee at her house, just the 2 of us while Marko was at work. Mom, I need to ask you something. What is it? Do you think I'm a failure? She looked up sharply. What? No. Why would you ask that? Because lately it feels like you do. Like nothing I do is good enough. Daniel, that's not true. Then why do you and Marko keep making comments about my job, my life? I'm doing fine. I'm happy. She set her coffee down, her expression hardening. Marko is just trying to help you. He sees potential in you that you're not using. I don't need his help. I'm not asking for it. Maybe that's the problem. The words hung between us. I stared at her, trying to understand when she'd stopped seeing me as her son and started seeing me as a project that needed fixing. I'm not a problem, Mom. I didn't say you were. But she might as well have. I left that conversation feeling worse than when it started, and things only got worse from there. My mother started talking to my grandmother about me. I didn't know the details at first, but I could sense the shift. My grandmother became more reserved when we spoke, asking careful questions about my work and life as if she were trying to assess something. Then came the family gathering I wasn't invited to, and then another, and another. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like watching a door close slowly, inch by inch, until one day you realize you're on the outside and it's locked. I started documenting things around that time. Dates, conversations, messages. I kept a folder on my laptop where I'd write down interactions, things Marko said, the way my mother responded. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. It just felt important to keep track, to have proof that I wasn't imagining things. One night, I went through all the old family photos on my phone, pictures from holidays, birthdays, random get-togethers. I noticed something I hadn't before. In the older photos, the ones from before Marko, my mother looked at me differently. There was warmth in her eyes, a connection. But in the more recent photos, the ones after the marriage, that warmth was gone. She looked at Marko the way she used to look at me, and when she looked at me at all, it was with something close to pity. I closed my phone and sat in the dark of my apartment, letting the reality settle over me. My mother hadn't just stopped respecting me. She'd been convinced that I was never worth respecting in the first place. And the person who'd convinced her was the man she'd married. I've always been good at noticing patterns. It's part of what makes me good at my job. I can look at a system, identify inefficiencies, see where things break down. I approach problems methodically, without emotion, just data and logic. So when I started treating my family situation like a system, the patterns became obvious. Every negative comment about me traced back to Marko. Every conversation where I was diminished or dismissed had Marko present, either physically or in spirit, through my mother's echoing of his words. Every decision to exclude me from family events happened after my mother consulted with him. He was the common denominator. I started paying closer attention to Marko himself, not just what he said, but how he said it. The way he positioned himself in conversations, always the authority, always the expert. The way he'd subtly undermine me while maintaining a veneer of friendliness. One Sunday afternoon, I was at my grandmother's apartment for what I thought would be a private visit. But when I arrived, my mother and Marko were already there. "Daniel," my grandmother said, opening the door. "Come in. Your mother and Marko stopped by." Of course they did. I walked into the living room, and Marko stood to greet me with his usual confident handshake. "Daniel, good to see you." "You too." We all sat down, and the conversation started innocently enough. My grandmother asked about work, and I gave my standard update. Same projects, different clients, it's been busy. "Busy is good," Marko said. "Though I wonder, Daniel, have you thought about what comes next?" "What do you mean?" "Well, you've been doing this for what, 8 years now? At some point you need to think about advancement, building something of your own." "I'm fine where I am." "Are you, though?" He leaned forward, his expression concerned. "I've been in business for 30 years, and I've seen what happens to people who get too comfortable. The world moves fast. If you're not growing, you're falling behind." My mother nodded along, and I could see my grandmother watching the exchange carefully. "I appreciate the advice," I said evenly, "but I'm not falling behind. I'm doing well." "I'm sure you are," Marko said. "But doing well and excelling are different things. Your mother worries about you, you know." I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't need her to worry." "Of course not," Marko said smoothly. "But that's what family does, right? We look out for each other." The hypocrisy of it almost made me laugh. This man, who'd spent the last year systematically undermining me, positioning himself as the concerned family member. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation, and then excused myself. As I was leaving, I heard Marko's voice from the living room. "He's defensive. That's usually a sign that deep down he knows there's a problem." I stopped in the hallway, just out of sight. "I just want him to be happy," my mother said. "Of course you do. But sometimes people need a push to reach their potential. He'll thank you eventually." I left before I could hear more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, the way Marko had spoken for me, defined my reality, all while pretending to be supportive. And my mother had let him. More than that, she'd agreed with him. I opened my laptop and added the conversation to my timeline document. As I typed, something caught my attention. A comment Marko had made months ago about his business. "I built my company from nothing. Started with a single import contract in 1995 and grew it into what it is today. I opened a new browser tab and started searching. Companies in our state had to register with the Secretary of State's office. All I needed was the company name. It took me 20 minutes to find it. Iliev Import and Distribution LLC. I pulled up the business registry and checked the filing date. Registered in 2003, not 1995, 2003. I sat back, staring at the screen. It was a small discrepancy. Maybe he'd been working in the industry before officially registering. Maybe he'd misremembered. But it nagged at me. I started digging deeper. I searched for news articles, business records, anything that mentioned Marko or his company. Most of what I found was routine: business license renewals, a few citations for minor regulatory issues, nothing major. But then I found something interesting. A business profile from 2005 mentioned that Iliev Import and Distribution primarily brokered deals between local businesses and European suppliers. The article quoted Marko saying he'd recently entered the import business after a successful career in sales. Recently entered. In 2005, not 1995, not even 2003. I made a note in my document and kept searching. Over the next few days, I spent my evenings building a profile of Marko's business history. The more I looked, the less impressive it became. The company was small. 3 employees, including Marko himself. Annual revenue reports showed modest earnings, nothing extraordinary. He'd filed for bankruptcy protection once in 2009, during the recession, though the business had survived. None of this matched the image he projected. The successful businessman who'd built an empire, who had connections across Europe, who spoke with authority about building wealth and taking risks. He wasn't lying, exactly. He did own a business. It did work with European suppliers. But he'd inflated everything, polished it, until it shone brighter than reality. And my mother had bought it completely. I started keeping a folder of documents. Business registrations, news articles, public records. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them yet, but I felt better having them, like I was building a case, even if I didn't know what the case was for. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was mid-December, and I was at my office late one evening, finishing up a project report. My phone buzzed with a message from my Aunt Ivana. "Can I call you?" I stepped outside into the cold air and dialed her number. "Daniel," she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "Aunt Ivana, what's going on?" "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone I said it." "Okay." She took a breath. "Your mother called me last week. She wanted to know if I thought you were struggling." "Struggling with what?" "She didn't say exactly. Just that she's worried you're not doing well, that you might need help." "I don't need help, I'm fine." "I know, that's what I told her. But Daniel..." She paused. "I think someone's been telling her things about you. Things that aren't true." "What kind of things?" "That you're in debt. That you can't hold down a job. That you're depressed and won't admit it." My chest tightened. None of that is true. "I know, that's why I'm calling. Because I've known you your whole life, and none of it makes sense. But your mother believes it." "Did she say who told her this?" "No, but I have a pretty good idea." We both knew who she meant. "What should I do?" I asked. "I don't know, but you need to be careful. Whatever's happening, it's bigger than just family drama." After we hung up, I stood outside my office building, watching cars pass on the street below. The cold bit through my jacket, but I didn't move. Marko wasn't just undermining me. He was actively lying about me, and my mother believed him. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder of documents I'd been collecting and started organizing them. Business records, timelines, articles, everything that showed the gap between what Marko claimed and what was real. Then I started a new document. I titled it, "Questions for a Lawyer." I didn't know what I was going to do yet. but I knew I couldn't let this continue. The lawyer's office was in a brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old books and furniture polish. I'd found him through a friend of a friend, someone who specialized in family law and personal disputes. His name was Richard Wolfe, and his receptionist had told me he could fit me in for a consultation on a Thursday afternoon. I took a half day off work and arrived 15 minutes early. The waiting room was small, just a few chairs and a coffee table stacked with old magazines. I sat there, my folder of documents on my lap, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe all of this was just family drama that would resolve itself. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then I thought about my mother telling my grandmother I'd achieved nothing, about Marko lying to my family about who I was, about being erased from my own life. No, I wasn't overreacting. Mr. Kovac? A woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway. Mr. Wolfe will see you now. I followed her down a narrow hallway to a corner office. Richard Wolfe was in his mid-50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood and shook my hand. Daniel, thanks for coming in. Please sit. I sat across from his desk and set my folder down. So, he said, settling into his chair, your message said you wanted to discuss a family matter. Tell me what's going on. I took a breath and started from the beginning. I told him about Marko, about my mother, about the gradual exclusion from my family. I told him about the lies, the distortions, the way I'd been rewritten in their narrative. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back and studied me for a moment. That's quite a story, he said finally. I know it sounds like I'm being sensitive. It doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like someone is engaging in a pattern of defamation and manipulation. He tapped his pen against his notepad. Let me ask you something. What do you want to happen here? I want my family to know the truth. About what specifically? About me. About Marko. About who's been lying and why. He nodded slowly. Okay, let's talk about what we can verify. You said you've been collecting documents? I opened my folder and spread the contents on his desk. Business registrations, news articles, timeline notes, screenshots of messages. He picked up the business registration document and examined it. So your stepfather claimed he started his company in 1995, but the official registration shows 2003? Yes, and articles from 2005 describe him as recently entering the import business. That's a significant discrepancy. He made a note. What else have you found? I walked him through everything. The bankruptcy filing, the modest revenue reports, the small size of the company, all of it painting a picture of a man who'd exaggerated his success. This is good, Richard said. It's not proof of anything criminal, but it shows a pattern of misrepresentation. What about your own financial situation? You said he's been telling your family you're in debt? I'm not in debt. I have student loans, but they're manageable. I can show you my bank statements, my credit report. Do that. We'll document your actual financial situation so it's a matter of public record if needed. Over the next hour, we went through everything systematically. He explained what could be legally verified, what was hearsay, and what might constitute defamation. Here's the thing, he said finally. Your stepfather hasn't done anything illegal. Exaggerating your success isn't a crime. Talking badly about your stepson in private conversations isn't technically defamation unless he's made provably false statements to third parties that have caused you tangible harm. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. I said he hasn't done anything illegal, but that doesn't mean you can't expose the truth. He leaned forward. You want your family to see who this man really is? Then you need to present them with facts they can't dispute. Official records, documented timelines, evidence that shows the gap between what he claims and what's real. How do I do that? You organize everything into a clear, simple narrative. You don't accuse, you don't get emotional. You just present the facts and let them speak for themselves. He walked me through the process. Pull credit reports to prove my financial stability, gather employment records to show my work history, document everything Marko had claimed, and match it against public records. If your family sees this information, he said, they'll have to ask themselves why he's been lying, and once they start asking that question, the rest will unravel. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. I had a plan. It wasn't about revenge or confrontation. It was about truth. Over the next 3 weeks, I became methodical. I pulled my credit report and printed it out. Perfect score, no missed payments, no defaults. I got a letter from my employer confirming my position, tenure, and salary. I organized the documents about Marko's business into a chronological folder, each claim matched with a corresponding record. I also started looking into property records. Marko had mentioned once that he owned several rental properties, another sign of his success. But when I checked the county assessor's website, I found only one property in his name: the house he lived in with my mother, which had been purchased after their marriage. No rental properties, no real estate empire. Another exaggeration. I added it to my folder. By mid-January, I had everything organized into a simple binder. Facts on the left, supporting documents on the right. No commentary, no accusations, just a timeline of claims versus reality. I met with Richard one more time to review everything. "This is solid," he said, flipping through the binder. "You've got documentation for everything. If you present this to your family, they won't be able to dismiss it as your word against his. Do you think they'll believe it?" The question isn't whether they'll believe it. The question is whether they can ignore it. He closed the binder and looked at me. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your mother, your stepfather, it's going to change permanently. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the last 6 months, the unanswered calls, the exclusion from gatherings, the lies told about me, the way my mother had looked through me in that cafe. "It already changed," I said. "I'm just making sure everyone knows why." He nodded. "Then you're ready. Choose your moment carefully. Do it somewhere neutral with witnesses so no one can distort what happened afterward." I know exactly where to do it. 2 days later, I got a text from my grandmother. "Daniel, would you like to come for tea on Sunday? Just us." I stared at the message. Just us. It was the first time in months anyone had invited me to anything. I replied, "I'd like that. Can I bring something?" "Just yourself." On Sunday morning, I put on clean clothes and picked up the binder from my desk. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. This wasn't just paper and ink. It was the truth, organized and undeniable. I put it in my bag and headed to my grandmother's apartment. My grandmother's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building on the east side of town. The elevator barely worked, so I took the stairs, my bag heavy against my shoulder. When I reached her door, I could hear voices inside. My stomach tightened. I knocked, and my grandmother opened the door. Her face was warm but cautious. "Daniel, come in." I stepped inside, and my suspicion was confirmed. My mother was sitting on the couch in the living room, and next to her, coffee cup in hand, was Marko. "Oh," I said. "I thought it was just us." "Your mother wanted to come," my grandmother said carefully, "and Marko drove her." "Of course he did." My mother looked up, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Daniel." "Mom." Marko stood and extended his hand, his usual confident smile in place. "Daniel, good to see you." I shook his hand without enthusiasm. "You too." We all sat down, and my grandmother poured tea. The room was thick with tension, everyone carefully polite, everyone waiting for someone else to speak first. Finally, my grandmother broke the silence. "Daniel, I asked you here because I've been worried about you." "I'm fine, Baba." "Are you?" She set her tea down. "Because your mother has been telling me things, and I need to understand what's going on." I glanced at my mother. She was looking down at her hands. What things? I asked, though I already knew. That you're struggling, that you're not doing well at work, that you've been difficult to reach. Difficult to reach, I repeated slowly. Baba, I've called you multiple times. I've sent messages. I've tried to be part of this family, but I keep getting shut out. That's not true, my mother said quietly. Isn't it? When's the last time you invited me to anything? When's the last time you answered my calls? Daniel, don't make this about what? About the fact that I've been erased from this family and nobody will tell me why? My grandmother raised her hand. Please, everyone calm down. Daniel, your mother is worried about you. She says you've been defensive, resistant to help. What help? I looked at my mother. What help have you offered? Or has Marko been doing all the talking for you? Marko set his coffee down, his expression still calm, but his eyes sharp. Daniel, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Your mother and I care about you. We're just trying to... You're trying to what? Fix me? Make me into something I'm not? We're trying to help you reach your potential, my mother said. You're so smart, Daniel, but you're stuck. You've been in the same job for years, living in the same apartment, doing the same things. Don't you want more? I'm happy where I am. Are you? Or are you just afraid to try? The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because I heard Marko's voice in them. My mother had absorbed his narrative so completely that she couldn't see me anymore. She only saw the failure he'd convinced her I was. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. What's that? Marko asked. It's the truth, I said. I set it on the coffee table. Baba, you said Mom's been telling you things about me. I think you should know where those things came from. My grandmother frowned. What do you mean? I opened the binder to the first page. Marko told Mom that I'm in debt, that I can't hold down a job, that I'm struggling and won't admit it. I looked at my mother. Did you ever ask me if any of that was true? She didn't answer. Because if you had, I could have shown you this. I turned the page, revealing my credit report. Perfect score. No debt except student loans, which I'm paying on schedule. And this, I flipped to the next page, is a letter from my employer confirming my position, my tenure, and my salary. I've been at the same company for 8 years because I'm good at what I do, not because I'm stuck. My grandmother leaned forward, examining the documents. My mother's face had gone pale. Daniel, I don't understand what you're trying to... I'm trying to show you that you've been lied to. I turned to Marko. You told my family I'm a failure. You told them I refuse to improve myself. You've spent a year convincing them that I'm less than I am. Why? Marko's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Daniel, I think you're being paranoid. Am I? I flipped to the next section of the binder. Let's talk about you then. You told us you started your company in 1995, built it from nothing. But according to the State Business Registry, Iliev Import and Distribution LLC wasn't registered until 2003, and articles from 2005 describe you as recently entering the import business. I slid the documents across the table. My grandmother picked them up, her eyes scanning the pages. You said you own multiple rental properties, I continued, but county records show only one property in your name, the house you bought after marrying my mother. You said you've built an empire, but your company has 3 employees and filed for bankruptcy in 2009. The room was silent. My mother was staring at the documents, her face stricken. My grandmother looked between me and Marko, her expression hardening. None of this means anything, Marko said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I never said, yes, you did, over and over. You positioned yourself as this successful businessman who'd built everything from scratch, and then you used that image to make me look small by comparison. I turned to my mother. He's been lying to you, Mom, about himself, about me, and you believed him because he sounds convincing, but none of it is real. My mother's hands were shaking. She looked at Marko, and for the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Marko, she said quietly. Elena, this is ridiculous. Your son is twisting everything. Did you tell me Daniel was in debt? He faltered. I was concerned. Did you tell me he was struggling at work? I thought. Answer the question. The authority in her voice surprised all of us. Marko stared at her, and I could see him recalculating, trying to find his footing. I was trying to help, he said finally. I saw Daniel coasting through life, not reaching his potential, and I thought if I could encourage him. By lying about him? My grandmother said sharply. By telling his mother that her son is a failure when he's clearly not? Marko's jaw tightened. I didn't lie. You exaggerated your own success and minimized Daniel's to make yourself look better, my grandmother said. That's what this is about, isn't it? You needed to be the successful one, the important one, and Daniel was in your way. The truth of it hung in the air. Marko looked around the room, realizing he'd lost control of the narrative. This is absurd, he said, standing abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. Sit down, my mother said. He stared at her. What? Sit down, Marko. He sat. My mother picked up the binder and started going through it page by page. Business records, articles, timelines. Her hands moved slowly, methodically, as if she were trying to piece together a puzzle. Finally, she looked up at me. How long have you been gathering this? She asked quietly. A few months. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because you stopped listening to me. Because every time I tried to talk to you, Marko was there, telling you what to think. She flinched, but she didn't deny it. My grandmother set her tea down, her expression grave. Elena, I think you need to have a serious conversation with your husband. Alone. My mother nodded slowly. She looked at Marko, and the disappointment in her face was devastating. We're leaving, she said. They left without another word. I watched through the window as they got into Marko's car, my mother's posture rigid, her face unreadable. When they were gone, my grandmother turned to me. Daniel, I need to apologize. Baba, no. Let me say this. She took my hands in hers. I believed what your mother told me about you. I should have asked you directly. I should have trusted my own eyes instead of someone else's words. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It's not yours either. She squeezed my hands. But Daniel, what happens now? Because this isn't over. I know. Your mother loves you, but she loves him too. And when people are forced to choose, I'm not asking her to choose. You might not have to, because after today, I don't think Marko is going to stay quiet. She was right, but I'd known that when I walked in with the binder. The truth was out now, and whatever came next, at least it would be built on something real. 3 days passed without a word from my mother. I didn't reach out. I'd said what I needed to say, and now the ball was in her court. On Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my grandmother. Family dinner at my place on Saturday. Everyone will be there, including you. I stared at the message for a long time. Everyone will be there. That meant Marko, too. This was it. The final reckoning. I replied, I'll be there. The next 2 days crawled by. I went to work, sat through meetings, analyzed reports, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying scenarios in my head, imagining how Saturday would go. Would Marko try to defend himself? Would my mother take his side? Would I walk into another ambush? By Friday night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Richard Wolf. Daniel, he said when he picked up. How did it go with your grandmother? It went well. She saw the documents. So did my mother and Marko. And? Now there's a family dinner on Saturday. Everyone's going to be there. He was quiet for a moment. That's the moment of truth then. Yeah. Are you ready? I don't know. What if my mother still takes his side? What if none of it mattered? Daniel, listen to me. You did everything right. You presented facts, not accusations. You gave your family the truth. What they do with that truth is on them, not you. But you can't control their response. You can only control yours. So what do? You go. You stay calm. And if anyone tries to distort what happened, you stick to the facts. Don't get emotional. Don't let Marko pull you into an argument. Just state the truth and let it stand. And if my mother doesn't believe me, then at least you'll know where you stand. But my guess? After what you showed her, she's already asking questions. Give her time to find the answers. Saturday arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully, putting on clean clothes, combing my hair. I wanted to look put together, stable, exactly the opposite of the failure Marko had painted me to be. I arrived at my grandmother's apartment at 3 o'clock. The door was unlocked, and I could hear voices inside. I took a breath and pushed it open. The living room was full. My grandmother sat in her usual chair by the window. My Aunt Ivana was on the couch next to my cousin Petar, and across from them, my mother sat alone. No Marko. Everyone looked up when I entered. Daniel, my grandmother said. Come in, sit. I sat in the empty chair near the door, my eyes on my mother. She looked tired, her face drawn, but there was something different about her. The defensive anger from Sunday was gone, replaced by something quieter, something like grief. Where's Marko? I asked. He's not coming, my mother said softly. My grandmother cleared her throat. I think your mother has something she wants to say to you. All eyes turned to my mother. She took a breath, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel, I owe you an apology, a real one. I waited. After you left on Sunday, I went through those documents you brought, all of them, and then I started asking Marko questions, about his business, about the things he'd told me, about you. Her voice cracked slightly. He couldn't answer them. He tried to deflect, to make it about something else, but when I pushed, the whole story fell apart. She looked up at me, her eyes red. He lied to me, Daniel, about everything, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because he made me feel important, successful by association. And in doing that, I let him convince me that you were less than you are. Mom, no, let me finish. She wiped her eyes. I told your grandmother you achieved nothing. I told your aunt you were struggling. I let my husband poison my view of my own son because it was easier than admitting I'd married someone who wasn't who he claimed to be. The room was silent. My Aunt Ivana was crying quietly. Petar looked at the floor. I don't know if you can forgive me, my mother continued. I don't know if I deserve it, but I need you to know that I see you now. I see who you really are, and I'm so sorry it took me this long. I felt something loosen in my chest. For 6 months, I'd carried the weight of her rejection, the confusion of being erased, and now, finally, she was acknowledging it. What about Marko? I asked quietly. I asked him to leave. He's staying with a friend while we figure things out. You're divorcing him? I don't know yet, but I can't be with someone I don't trust. And I don't trust him anymore. My grandmother spoke up. Elena, tell Daniel what you found out. My mother nodded. I called some of Marko's former business associates, the ones he said were friends. Most of them didn't want to talk to me, but one of them finally did. He told me that Marko has a pattern. He gets close to people, especially women with assets or connections, and he uses them to build his image. He doesn't steal from them or anything illegal. He just borrows their credibility. And when he met you? I asked. I was a single mother with a stable job and a son who was doing well. Marko saw an opportunity to look like the successful stepfather, the man who stepped in and elevated the family. But for that to work, He needed you to look like you needed elevating. The truth of it was devastating in its simplicity. Marko hadn't just undermined me out of malice. He'd done it to create a narrative where he was the hero, and my mother had been his supporting actress in a story I never agreed to be part of. "What happens now?" I asked. My grandmother leaned forward. "Now we rebuild. You're part of this family, Daniel. You always have been. And anyone who can't see that doesn't belong here." My Aunt Ivana nodded. "I'm sorry too, Daniel. I should have questioned things sooner. I should have reached out to you directly." "We all should have," Peter said quietly. "I repeated things I heard without checking if they were true. That was wrong." I looked around the room at my family. Imperfect, flawed, but here, trying. My mother stood and walked over to me. She knelt in front of my chair, taking my hands in hers. "I know I can't fix this overnight," she said. "I know it's going to take time for you to trust me again, but I want to try, if you'll let me." I looked into her eyes and saw the mother I remembered from before Marko. The one who'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. The one who'd been proud when I graduated college. The one who'd been there before she'd let someone else tell her who I was. "Yeah," I said. "We can try." She pulled me into a hug, and I felt her shoulders shake as she cried. I held her, feeling the weight of 6 months of silence finally lifting. When we pulled apart, my grandmother was wiping her own eyes. "All right," she said. "Enough crying. Daniel, you're staying for dinner. We have a lot to catch up on." The rest of the evening was quiet, almost ordinary. We ate together, talked about safe topics, avoided the elephant that had been in the room for so long. But it felt different. The coldness was gone, replaced by something fragile but real. As I was leaving, my mother walked me to the door. "Daniel," she said, "that binder you brought, can I keep it?" "Why?" "Because I need to remember. I need to see it in black and white so I don't let myself forget what happened." I nodded. "It's in Baba's apartment. It's yours." "Thank you." She hesitated. "And Daniel, I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the man you've become." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded. I drove home through the quiet streets, the city lights blurring past my window. When I got to my apartment, I sat in the dark for a while, processing everything. For 6 months, I'd been erased. Written out of my own story by a man who needed me to be small so he could feel big. And my family had believed him because lies, when told confidently enough, can sound like truth. But I'd fought back, not with anger or confrontation, but with something more powerful: facts, evidence, the quiet, undeniable weight of reality. And in the end, the truth had won. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "Marko's moving out next week. I'm going to file for separation. I wanted you to know." I typed back, "Thank you for telling me." A moment later, another message: "I love you." I stared at those 3 words for a long time. They felt different now. Earned, maybe. Real in a way they hadn't been for a while. "I love you too, Mom." I set my phone down and looked around my small apartment. The same walls, the same furniture, the same life I'd been living all along. But something had shifted. I wasn't the failure Marko had claimed I was. I wasn't the son my mother had temporarily forgotten. I was Daniel Kovac, 34 years old, technical consultant, stable, observant, patient. And I'd won.